Only 1 month after introducing its online harms legislation, the BC government is putting the bill on hold. Premier David Eby says it's because his government has reached an agreement with social media giants. He said representatives from Meta, TikTok, X, and Snapchat all agreed to form an online safety action table to discuss tangible steps to protect people from harm.
These companies will be working with us on a defined timeline to change in a meaningful way the experience of kids on social media in British Columbia. They understand our concern and the urgency with which we're approaching this issue. They also understand the bill's still there. It can come forward if necessary.
Nikki Sharma is the Attorney General of British Columbia. Minister Sharma, welcome back to the show. Good to speak with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
So it's just a month, less than a month since we last spoke, less than a month after introducing your online harms legislation. You've already decided to put it on hold. I mean, that's a pretty sharp turn from Premier Eby saying social media giants are big faceless corporations that can't be trusted. What's changed?
Well, I think that we are all concerned about online harms and how they're affecting our society and our children. And my obligation, our government's obligation, is to see how we can mitigate the harm, how we can prevent it from happening. We put the bill on pause under the condition that we would set up a BC online action table with some of the big companies. So that would include Meta, TikTok, X, and Snapchat. To see if we can get some immediate action on some of the harms, particularly on our youth in the province. And I'm going to be watching to see if that's possible at this table. And I felt like it would be good if we could get some immediate action rather than being tied up for potentially years in a courtroom.
Okay, so what does immediate action look like? And I note that the companies you mentioned they're big players. They own a lot of the big platforms, but no Google, which owns YouTube, which I got 2 kids, 10 and under, who spend all day there if I'd let them. Why isn't Google at the table and part of this?
Well, you know what? We're hopeful that the table will get bigger. We were able to get some pretty big players at the table right now, and we're going to be talking about exactly the things that you're talking about. I'm particularly concerned about the mental health and anxiety of children these days, exploitation online bullying and harassment. And I want to see what these companies, what could be a new standard or a new set of protections for people online. I think it's government's obligations all across the world that are looking at this as the science evolves and people are concerned about those things. And, governments need to step up. I've heard just the most tragic stories from parents when it comes to their use online. And it's not only the tragedies we want to prevent, but also to what you mentioned, which is that everybody that has kids sees, how social media and platforms are affecting them. And sometimes it's in really good ways, right? We can connect with people, we can understand the world better in different ways. And sometimes it's in really damaging ways. And I think as a government and governments around the world, we need to understand how to make that better, right? All the harms that we see online. And, I'm going to be looking for working with these companies to see what, that they come to the table with some solutions. And, the government has plenty of options when it comes to how it can step in, whether it's litigation, which I know it is a possibility, and other jurisdictions are doing that, regulations or legislation, and we've been stepping up with legislation too to protect kids from sexploitation and things that happen online. And sitting at the table with these companies, which I think will give us an opportunity to understand how we can make it better for people in British Columbia.
So just on Google, are they considering joining? Have they refused to join? Has that a conversation that hasn't happened yet? Because I know you've got Meta, TikTok, X, and Snapchat, but where is Google in this mix?
I have had meetings with Google on some of the other work that we've been working on, particularly non-consensual disclosure of intimate images and things like that. We welcome them to the table if they would like to join the discussions. I know they are a major player for certain aspects of it. And I've also had conversation with YouTube about how they protect young people online. And I'm hopeful they'll join the table as well. Okay,
so you say you want to see tangible steps, immediate steps. Can you give me an example of what you would want to see and in what sort of timeline you want to see it in? Because this legislation was, one of the issues highlighted was sexploitation in particular online. What are the immediate steps you're hoping to get out of this?
Yeah, so there's kind of 3 areas that I'm concerned about, and I'm open to the discussion at the table of where we can come up with the tangible solutions. I'm not a tech expert, and I don't pretend to be, but what I'm concerned about is exploitation of young people online. I'm concerned about mental health and anxiety and the rise that we see in our young people today. And I'm concerned about online harassment and bullying and the things that happen to people online, and online hate. I think there are tools that are out there that can make that better, can make our online spaces safer. And I'm looking forward to sitting down with these companies to understand what they think and what their options and solutions are, so we can get, just basically a safer online environment for people.
Won't the federal online harms legislation deal with a lot of these issues? Like what does this table do that the proposed federal legislation won't?
Yeah, so I want to make it clear that I think governments everywhere need to step up to address this issue. So I am glad that the federal government has stepped into the space, and they certainly have different powers than I do in this province. But I think we have the same concerns, right? That we're acting for the people of our jurisdictions to make sure online spaces are safer. And certainly that bill, which we're looking through from the British Columbian perspective, will have some new tools for that. But when it comes down to it, we would like to have action from the companies that control a lot of our online spaces to make it safer. And they are the experts of their ability to do that. And we are governments that are representing the public interest, and we need to come together to make it better.
Okay, so you found a solution, at least in the short term, where you think you can have a dialogue with social media companies to deal with whatever unintended harms or negligent harms are caused by their platforms. But this legislation was meant to deal with all companies, right? Like any kind of a product put into the marketplace that was causing a harm, that it would give your government the ability to take legal action against them. And this had a lot of pushback from other companies in all sectors, saying this could have unintended legal consequences for them, create all forms of liability. I mean, have you just abandoned that broader idea now? And was it that pushback and warnings of what it could do to investment that led to this?
Yeah, we've always been clear that the target of our focus was on online platforms. And even when I launched the bill did give powers, and I think I was on the show to talk about, it did give powers for government to step in to a lawsuit, to litigation against companies that are basically have conducted harm to the citizens of British Columbia, and we've had to pay the healthcare costs along with other costs. I was having meetings with businesses to make it clear that if you are not a wrongdoer, if you're not somebody that has breached the law, then it's not something that would apply to you. And I was confident that we could get that clarity with the business. The reason that the bill is on hold right now is for this action table. To see if we can come up with solutions with these companies, social media platforms, because that's our real focus as a government right now, is to make sure that online areas are safer for people. I've met with parents that have lost kids over some of the harms that they've experienced online, and it's a very serious issue in society. So it's our focus right now, and that's the reason for this table and the work that we're doing.
But if the focus all along has been social media platforms, why not narrow the scope of the legislation only to deal with the tech platforms? Why write it in such a way that retailers and construction industries and everybody else out there were coming up with legal opinions warning of the consequences of where this might go?
Yeah, I think there is a role for the Attorney General to collect, and we have seen that with the opioid litigation, but I want to make it clear that it's an incidence where there's been wrongdoing. We wanted a piece or a bill that was agile enough for the Attorney General to be able to assess when that wrongdoing, and it's a high level of harm that sometimes we're talking about with companies where it's been years of taxpayers paying for the consequences of their actions, like we saw with opioids. I think it's right that government has a role to step in there if that's the harm and wrongdoing that society is facing from the actions and wrongdoing of a company. I think we get there, and we will get there with companies to make it clear that it's not an incidence where there is no wrongdoing. The focus right now is what we've said all along, is to try to get results for people in the online harms, and to make sure that people are safer in the online environment.
Okay, so while you've got it paused, just as a final point, Minister, while you've got it paused, you're going to talk to the social media companies and see where this goes. What's the timeline for either pressing stop or undoing the pause on this legislation? Because your legislative session is not going to last much longer. You've got an election later this year. What's the timeline where you need to see something, whether you decide whether or not you bring this bill back?
Yeah, so we have built in with the agreement and the table some check-ins where we're going to see where the progress is. I don't want to predetermine what the fixes are. There may be, and I'm hopeful to see very quick abilities for us to step up the safety of people online and what those commitments might be. But we've built in regular check-ins for us to see if this action table is making progress and there is potential for this table to show progress on the issues. And that's what we're going to be focused on.
BC Attorney General Nikki Sharma, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.